A very special meeting tonight. It's the first time that our student comrades here are about to speak, addressing students in Britain. And there's the first example of a mobile phone.
No, it's going on.
And it's an excellent opportunity for us here as students in Britain to understand what's going on inside Iran, the brave struggles that our comrades are undertaking, and also to hear a bit more about the dynamics behind the drive to war in Iran, the targeting of Iran by US and UK imperialism predominantly. So we have a very interesting panel. To my far left, I'd say that in a spatial sense, maybe not politically, is Kaveh Abbasian, who's the spokesperson of Freedom and Equality students in Iran. Next to him is Behrooz Karimizadeh. And we have also Torab Saleth, who is a member of the Hands Off the People of Iran Steering Committee, and they will be speaking, and there'll be plenty of time for questions, discussion, debate, controversy. We'll see what happens. So without further ado, I think Torab, you're going to speak first, aren't you? Yeah, I'll introduce Torab Saleth.
All right, thanks, Ben. Hello, everybody. As the current financial crisis has made glaringly obvious, capitalism is in decline. And you know, whenever capitalism is in decline, war is on the agenda, because one of the ways it can resolve its crisis is through wars. It's not accidental that since the collapse of the Soviet Union, when we were promised world peace and there's no longer any need for Cold War, we have had more wars than the last 50 years. In fact, they have killed as many as they managed to kill in the First World War already. If you add it all up, it's nearly roughly around the same figure as they managed to massacre in the First World War. And within this decline, USA is in even a worse position, because it's declining even further relative to Europe and now China and emerging Russian capitalism. So war is on the agenda. Even if you forget the Middle East, there's going to be lots of little wars everywhere in the next 10, 15 years. Probably the current crisis would even intensify that. As far as the Middle East is concerned, leaving aside even the oil question, the geopolitical importance of the Middle East is such that this would be one of the areas in which the inter-imperialist rivalry would concentrate, because it's probably one of the most important geopolitical regions in the globe. So the fact that at the moment it seems the threat of war is receding against Iran, I think is still there, the danger is still there, and there is absolutely no way that you can think any change in US administration, or the fact that they are already too much involved with their own crisis would reduce the threat of war. If anything, I think the threat of war is even more real now than it was a few years ago. And this threat faces all of us. As I said, even if you forget Middle East, the threat of war in the next 10, 15 years, maybe at first local wars, is, real threat. And it's a threat which is, which needs mobilization everywhere, which needs our reaction everywhere. So the first danger for us, for all of us, would be this US administration's warmongering, I think, in the next 10, 15 years. Every year or so, we're going to have another scenario. You have already witnessed how they are trying to, revive the Cold War by, provoking the Russians into some sort of confrontation. So it's a real threat, and we should not forget that in all of this, they pose the main danger, and it is a threat we have to mobilize and work against. But on the other hand, this should not in hands of people of Iran campaign, we are of the opinion that this should not, give us any sort of permission to forget what is actually happening in the Middle East, especially for those of us who come from that region. How can we forget this? The fact that, USA invaded Iraq doesn't mean Saddam Hussein was a nice guy. It's just, why should the two equate to each other? Unfortunately, this simple fact is not accepted by a lot of people in the anti-war coalition in Britain. The simple fact that USA has threatened Iran doesn't turn Iran into an anti-imperialist, heaven for the left. In fact, this Iranian regime, if anything, was brought into power by the same USA, which is now threatening it with war. It was so much frightened of the left taking over after the Iranian Revolution that it did all in its power to make sure these mullahs come into power anyway. If the USA is, trying to justify its war by the fact that it says this regime is undemocratic, we need a change, it has now even started defending the Iranian people against this regime in their propaganda, it has to be brought to their attention that, thank you very much, we have already witnessed your change of government, from above. In fact, the Iranian, Islamic regime is the change of government from above, helped by CIA and USA in the first place. So thank you very much. We don't want another change of government from above. What we need is a revolution from below. The movements of women, students, workers, national minorities, all the movements which led to the revolution in '79, which despite the suppression by the Islamic regime for the last 20, 30 years or so, it is beginning to revive. Over the last, 8 years or so, especially since the disillusionment with the reformist wing of the Iranian regime itself, the radicalization is growing day by day. And this is the movement in which we should put all our hopes. This is the movement by defense of which we can actually fight the threat of war. And as it were, carry out a change of regime from below. So in this sense, defense of social movements in Iran is as important for us as fighting against the threat of US warmongering in the next 10, 15 years. So basically because of that, we have tried to distinguish ourselves from other currents within the anti-war coalition. So neither to reduce the threat of war by USA and the dangers that that poses for the population of Iran, but also, show up the nature of the Iranian regime and the fight that is going on against this regime inside, and why and how, by helping that movement, we can actually ensure progress in the area, rather than a total destruction and total devastation as it has happened in Iraq, as we can see already. So in this sense, although it's very sad whenever, comrades from Iran are forced into exile, it gives us the opportunity to have, excellent opportunity for us here to have two excellent representatives from the Iranian student movement, both of whom have been very active and can give you a lot of information on any questions you have. So it is very opportune to have these comrades here who can explain one of these movements, the Iranian student movement. Iranian student movement in Iran has traditionally been at the forefront of the social movements. Given the weakness of sort of working class traditionally, because it's a relatively young working class, student politics in Iran has always been a very significant issue. In fact, the a slogan which popularized the Iranian Revolution in 1979, General Strike to Overthrow the Shah, was coined by the student movement. This slogan was popularized by the student movement before any of the left groups even made that a slogan. One of the student demonstrations 3 years before 1979 revolution had that slogan and its banner in front. So the student movement has played a major role in Iranian politics over the last 50, 60 years. And it's again exactly the same. In the early 40s, they basically raided, the paramilitary groups of this regime raided every university, ransacked student halls of residence, sacked every leftist student, sacked every leftist lecturer. After that, they closed down every institution of higher education for 2 years. Then, when they opened it, you had to pass ideological tests in order to get into any course. You wanted to do engineering, you had to know who was the second wife of Prophet Muhammad before you could get into the course. So despite all that, despite all this, filtering and brainwashing that has been going on over the years since, probably 15 years, 16 years since they opened up universities again, we have now seen a wave of radicalization within the Iranian student movement, the likes of which I have never seen before. In fact, for us, it is absolutely, it's so exciting to see not only a radicalization of the youth within the student movement, but also the political nature of this radicalization, which is, look at 30 years of theocratic rule, you have the most radical socialist student movement anywhere, anywhere today in the world, inside Iran. So it is for the future of the opposition to the Iranian regime, I think the student movement is very significant. And it's not accidental that the Iranian regime has turned against the student movement. Last year, they arrested scores of student activists, and many of them have been tortured. You have one sitting next to me who has undergone many jail terms and torture under the current conditions. And this is again another of those issues which brings even to sharper focus why in any anti-war campaign in Britain we should actually defend the Iranian people. Because the threat is actually against the Iranian people. It's not against the Iranian regime. In fact, the Iranian regime itself is now using the threat of war to suppress every social movement. The current excuse by the Iranian regime, every oppositionist, women, students, workers are now arrested and charged for endangering national security. Because and they are even sometimes openly charged with being agents of US imperialism, simply because they are protesting against injustice or protesting against the Iranian regime. This is vital that we do not forget that issue in our campaigns here and concentrate our energies on actually defending the real movements that are going on inside Iran in opposition to this regime. And as I said, although I'm really sad to see comrades here, on the other hand, we should, really be grateful that we have such a good opportunity to listen firsthand to, the experience of the comrades in highlighting how important it is to defend these movements, and build the solidarity with these movements inside Iran. I thank you.
Thank you. Speaker is Kaveh Abbasian.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Ben, and many thanks to Comrade Torab. First of all, I should say that I'm not that well in this language, in English, to make a speech in English. So I wrote my notes in my papers, and I think it's better for me to read it from the papers, yeah? Dear friends, dear comrades, thank you for your interest in the freedom and equality seeking students in Iran. Here I would like to thank all of the people and organizations who supported Iranian students' struggle for freedom and equality. As you may know, the freedom and equality seeking students is a group of radical Iranian university students. In 2006, our group began its opposition to Iran's dominant classes. Marxian analysis of contemporary society served to provide the guiding principles of our movement. The freedom and equality seeking students chose to forge a brave path forward despite the risks before them. Our original objectives included the following. 1. To form a nationwide network of politically active Iranian students. 2. To fulfill the need for students skilled in Iran. 3. To abolish the military occupation of Iranian universities. 4. To oppose the threat of any imperialist intervention, war, or sanctions against people of Iran. And 5. To form a solidarity with social and workers' movements in Iran. These goals were essential points in our organizations of Iran's Students' Day, demonstrations of 2006. The two essential slogans in the 2006 Students' Day activities were no to war and free universities from invading military forces. In our efforts to spread the word regarding the struggle, we promoted our opinion and our theory through articles published in university-based magazines and local newspapers from various aspects, from political, social to revolutionary street art. Iranian students continued the important work of organizing demonstrations through 2007, holding events on 8th of March, International Women's Day, and May Day. The final event of 2007 was the annual Students' Day event in 6th of December. The event was planned as a huge, coordinated series of demonstrations to be held at universities across the entire nation. The Iranian regime was alarmed and threatened by the political implications of these events and exercised extreme repression in an effort to disrupt Students' Day activities. 3 days before Students' Day 2007, political leaders, organizers, and students affiliated with Iranian students were arrested and imprisoned. Altogether, about 70 people were arrested. The arrested students remained in custody for at least 50 days, enduring solitary confinement and torture. Most of these individuals were required to post exorbitant amounts of money for bail prior to being released. They are currently awaiting trial for their alleged crimes. There is news that there are unbelievably heavy sentences tailored for the Students for Freedom and Equality students. We fear very heavy sentences, including extended periods of imprisonment and execution for group members and leaders. The fabricated allegations against group leaders include charges of attempting to overthrow the Iranian regime and collusion with opposition groups outside of the country. Each of these charges is punishable by death according to this Islamic legal system of Iran. The students fear that when the allegations are presented in the court, there will not be much time to defend against these charges. It will be difficult and to rescue these victims from the forces of reactionary oppression. The struggle of the freedom and equality-seeking students of Iran deserves international attention. For far too long, religious and humanitarian organizations, as well as progressives and radicals worldwide, have turned a blind eye to the situation in Iran. Many comrades have faced extreme repression, torture, and execution. Following this new wave of suppression of the activists of the social movements, a number of activists left Iran illegally to save their lives and the lives of others related to them. Many of our comrades were forced to flee Iran to escape imprisonment and torture. Unfortunately, there is no end to their persecution. Our comrades have been arrested in different countries, in Greece, in Turkey, and even in the UK. They are in prison and have been charged for illegal entrance to the country. They face deportation to Iran. One of our comrades, Davud Bagheri, a students, activist, writer, chief editor of Binahayat magazine, fled Iran through border mountains and was arrested by Turkey's police in Istanbul. before he could report himself to UN. He was kept in Adarnez refugee detention camp since 5th of April 2008. He is under severe pressure from jail keepers. He has committed suicide once out of the desperation. We are gravely concerned about the possibility of deporting Dawood and many other comrades to Iran by Turkey's security forces and government's officials. Deportation of these activists has life-threatening consequences for them. Therefore, our request is to please take necessary actions with regards to UN and the Turkish immigration authorities in order to speed up the asylum process of these activists and their immediate transfer to a safe country. Your humanitarian actions is extremely important for saving the lives of innocent individuals who have not committed any crimes but defending their basic human rights regarding freedom and equality. Student groups have been at the forefront of demands for greater human rights in Iran in recent years. Pressure on the students' movement from the Islamic regime of Iran has never succeeded in stopping student protests. Students in Iran need your support more than any time. Our comrades are desperately in need of international media attention, as well as assistance from political and humanitarian organizations. We need your support. Thank you.
Kaveh, I can only echo those sentiments in terms of crying out for solidarity, for support, and building links, greater links with the Iranian students, Iranian workers, and the Iranian women's movement as well. And with that in mind, we're going to pass around a sort of sign sheet, attendance sheet, and basically looking to get as many people involved in our work in the universities here in London, putting on more meetings, demonstrations, and building more active solidarity with comrades in Iran. There's a conversation going on in Farsi, I don't understand. That's fine. The next speaker is Behrooz Karimizadeh. He's going to be translated by Torab, as far as I understand. Is that? Yeah, okay, good. So
we were just working out how to do it.
Okay. Come on, Behrooz.
منم با سلام و تشکر از همه شما عزیزانی که اینجا تشریف آوردید صحبتامو شروع میکنم و سعی میکنم که خیلی کوتاه صحبت کنم و فکر میکنم که توی یه محیط صمیمانه اگر صحبت متقابل داشته باشیم و حالت بحث داشته باشه خیلی شاید جلسه بهتر بره جلو تا سخنرانی خسته کننده.
First of all, thank you for coming and inviting me and giving me the opportunity to sort of talk to you. I shall try to be brief because I prefer in a nice comradely atmosphere we can actually have a debate and discussion rather than me giving a speech. I'm not literally translating, by the way, I'm sort of giving you the gist of it, you know. So forgive me.
I don't make two mistakes there, I didn't say.
I'm not a translator, I'm not a professional. I have like a fish, very short memory, so.
من صحبتمو با یه تشکر شروع میکنم و با دو تا درخواست به انتها میرسونم. اول لازمه مثل رفیق عزیزم کاوه تشکر کنم از تمام انسان‌های شریفی که انسانو به عنوان یه هویت جهانی فراموش نکردن و خارج از این که توی کجای جهان زندگی میکنن و یا در چه کشوری هستن و یا به چه زبانی صحبت میکنن از دانشجویان آزادیخواه و برابری طلب ایران حمایت کردن، از کسایی که توی زندان‌ها بودن و زیر شکنجه قرار داشتن.
I want to take the opportunity to thank Kaveh for his talk and also to thank everybody for supporting the freedom and equality organization of Iranian students and their struggles against the Iranian regime. And it is good to see that people still haven't forgotten the value of human beings everywhere, despite their color, race, or countries they belong. and defend, movements for justice and equality.
این تشکر فقط یک چیز سطحی نیست. مسئله ایه که در دنیای امروز اهمیت زیادی داره. وقتی که به دنیای امروز و دور و برمون نگاه میکنیم، دوره‌ای که در اوج جهانی سازی و پیوند منافع و سرنوشت‌ها در سراسر دنیا با هم هستیم، میفهمیم که این حمایت‌ها چه ارزشی دارن و چه چیزی رو نشون میدن.
When I thank you all for your support, this is not just, trying to be, polite or saying it. Given the current nature of the world we live in and the globalization that it has undergone and the situation that in which every movement and every social community somehow or other linked to each other, the support of movements everywhere is become a duty and it's become a necessity actually now.
وقتی از منافع و سرنوشت صحبت میکنیم باید از منافع و سرنوشت‌های مختلفی صحبت بکنیم. از منافع و سرنوشت‌های دولت‌هایی که به هم گره خوردن و گاه بینشون تضاده باید صحبت کرد. منافعی که توسط مؤسسات مالی و شرکت‌های چند ملیتی و گاهن توسط سرویس‌های امنیتی متروپول هدایت و کنترل میشه.
When we talk about interests, we have to bear in mind that there are two sets of different, interests and concerns of the people and of the states. The fact that given the multinational nature of capitalist growth in the last period, links these interests of the states in such a way that conflicts, when it arises, is very different from the conflict between the states and the people. Is carried out by instruments of, economic instruments like the multinationals or the instruments of secret intelligence services or various institutions that they have built, which was built to defend their interests. But as far as the people are concerned, the only way they can maintain their unity and defend their interests is by the organizations, by the unions, by the associations, by the type of organizations they manage to build. And it is vital that these, support and help each other before we can defend our unity and our interest against the interest of the states.
و زمانی اهمیت این تشکر و مهم بودن جلساتی از این قبیل رو بیشتر درک میکنیم که به دنیای امروز نگاه میکنیم. دنیایی که تئوریسین‌هاش اعلام کردن که هیچ آلترناتیوی برای شرایط موجود وجود نداره. دنیایی که تاریخش به پایان رسیده و نیروهایی که معتقد بودن به آزادی و برابری انسان‌ها، نیروهای تغییرخواه مدت هاست که خیره و ناامیدانه به وضعیت موجود نگاه میکنن.
And we are, in a situation in which it appears as if the unity of the states or the interest of the states is on the ascendancy, and the interest of the people and the needs of the people and the unity of the people and the forces that call for change are, in a weaker position. This is the sort of current situation in which we live in. I think I read it right.
و امروز وضعیتی که ما شاهد هستیم رکود اقتصادی بی سابقه در کشورهای سرمایه‌داری پیشرفته و گسترش جنگ‌ها به وجود اومدن و حضور دیکتاتوری‌های مختلف تو انواع کشورها از خاورمیانه گرفته تا کشورهای آفریقایی زنگ‌ها رو به صدا درآورده. زنگ خطر برای سرمایه‌داری و دولت‌ها و زنگ آماده باش و بیدار باش برای مردم و نیروهای تغییر طلب.
And we see in the current situation a financial crisis and a stagnation of capitalism, increasing threat of war and actual wars everywhere in the world, and various dictatorial regimes in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, which should for us be the danger sign that this is, threatening, the forces that want change and progress. And it is a call for us to get ready, to be ready to confront these new challenges.
در چنین فضایی حمایت از این حرکت‌ها در سراسر جهان و اینجور پیوندهای خارج از زبان‌ها و ملیت‌ها داره اهمیت خیلی زیادی. ما در ایران با شرایط پیچیده‌ای روبرو هستیم. از طرفی در جامعه زندگی می‌کنیم که مشکلات خیلی زیادی داره و مردم برای خواسته‌های زیادی در حال مبارزه هستند. از جمله خواست برابری زنان و مردان از نظر حقوقی و از نظر اجتماعی، از جمله برای حق تشکل داشتن برای کارگران، برای دانشجویان و ما در چنین شرایطی داره وضعیت پیچیده‌ای هستیم.
Given the current atmosphere, the necessity for solidarity between social movements of various race or color and countries is absolutely vital. In Iran, we are facing a very complex situation in which there is a number of, social movements demanding reform and raising issues which has, caused a lot of, opposition and a lot of repression by the Iranian regime, including the women's movement for equal rights, the movement for independent organization, movement for democracy, movement for freedom, and all these movements require, to be taken as part of that general solidarity, international solidarity movement.
وضعیت پیچیده‌ای که ازش صحبت کردم بر اصل شرایطی که ما در این که می‌خوایم با استبداد مقابله کنیم و برای به دست آوردن حقوق مردم کشورمون مبارزه کنیم، میخوایم نسبت به هر گونه دخالت خارجی در سرنوشت مردم ایران مرزبندی داشته باشیم، چون تجربه و سابقه تاریخی مردم ما و کل منطقه خاورمیانه اینه که دخالت‌های نظامی و غیر نظامی کشورهای سرمایه‌داری پیشرفته مثل آمریکا و یا انگلیس در منطقه غیر از دیکتاتوری و گاهن گسترش یا عمیق شدن دیکتاتوری برای این مردم عواقبی نداشته.
The complexity of the situation is in the fact that whilst on the one hand we have to defend all these social movements and defend demands for freedom and justice and equality against the dictatorial regime in Iran. On the other hand, we have to, have very sharp position on the threat of intervention by advanced capitalist countries in the region, whether it be war or otherwise. because the historical experience of us in the region shows every time they have done such, it has not only not benefited the Iranian people or the people, it has actually made the situation worse.
و داشتن چنین موضعی در شرایطی که دانشجویان و کارگران دارای هیچ حق تشکلی نیستن، آزادی بیان کاملا تو ایران محدوده و نشریات محدودی هم که در دانشگاه ها بودن در بسته شدن، روند شکنجه و کشتار فعالین سیاسی و مخالفین حکومت دوباره در ایران شروع شده و هزینه‌ها و اقتصاد مملکت، درآمد این کشور به طرز وحشتناکی در حال صرف شدن برای هزینه‌های نظامیه و در چنین شرایطی این مرزبندی و این مبارزه رو پیگیری کردن خیلی کار سختی.
Given the economic crisis in Iran and given the current situation in which the vast majority of the state budget is expended on military expenditure, and the repression against the mass movement for justice, for social demands, for economic demands is being increasingly facing harsh repression. Students are being arrested, women are being arrested, workers are being arrested. Every social movement is suppressed. In the middle of all this, to have this sharp, demarcation, this threat of foreign intervention, is not that easy inside Iran. It's a complex, situation.
و ما همیشه دو تا شعار کلیدی داشتیم، نه به استبداد و نه به دخالت خارجی و حق تعیین سرنوشت توسط خود مردم ایران، نه کسی دیگه.
In this we have always emphasized three slogans: no to dictatorship, no to foreign intervention, and self-determination for Iranian people themselves. We think these are crucial to always emphasize in such atmosphere, in such a situation.
و در پایان من صحبتامو با اون دو تا درخواستی که گفتم تموم میکنم. یک درخواست از همه شما و همه کسان دیگه که صحبتامو خواهند شنید که حمایت از مردم آزادیخواه و جنبش هایی که برای به دست آوردن حقوقشون در کشورهای مثل ایران وجود داره و اینکه این حکومت رو نه در جیب اون دیکتاتوری ها بریزن و نه به بهانه این دیکتاتوری ها این حمایت ها از این مردم قطع بشه.
Finally, I want to reiterate my two main, sort of requests from you and from this meeting, and which is we should never, because of this threat of war, end our support for the freedom-loving people of Iran or anywhere else, or all the social movements which opposes this regime. And don't forget that despite the threat of war.
و دوم اینکه دنیایی که توش زندگی میکنیم هنوز پر از مشکله، هنوز پر از فقره، پر از جنگه، پر از شکنجه، پر از حکومت‌های دیکتاتوری و من هنوز هر شب به این مسئله فکر میکنم که راه تغییرش چیه؟ چرا تا حالا ما موفق نشدیم این شرایط رو عوض کنیم از انقلاب فرانسه تا حالا و میخوام که شما هم به این مسئله فکر کنید، شاید بتونیم با هم یک بار این دنیا رو عوض کنیم.
And the second point is that the world we live in is still full of poverty, contradictions, wars, injustice, and every day, every night, I think about this. Why even since the French Revolution, we still haven't managed to resolve any of these problems in the world. And I invite you all together to actually think about this issue a lot more and find solutions to resolve this global problem.
Okay, questions, comments, interventions, that sort of stuff? Anyone, just raise your hand and I'll take you. Tina?
Yeah, my name is Tina Becker from Hands of the People of Iran and Communist Party. And just quickly, starting with the point of information, which probably people in this room don't know, because listening to Kaveh and Behrooz, how can you disagree that we are against war, of course, but we are also in solidarity with the students and women and workers' movements in Iran, and they're who are involved in the struggle against their own regime as well as against the war. How can you be against that? And yet, unfortunately, the left in Britain, the anti-war movement, particularly the Stop the War Coalition, has decided to ban Hands of the People of Iran from affiliating, because these are the two slogans we're putting forward. And apparently by saying we have to be in solidarity, in active solidarity with the students, that means we're giving ammunition to the Iranian regime. We're giving ammunition to have Iran bombed, because the students, they want bombs to be free. And that's why it's so great to have these comrades here to show that is definitely not what they want. There are people in Iran who are fighting against the war and against their own regime, and these are the people who we are supporting. And we have been told they don't exist. There are no people in Iran who are fighting for democracy and against the war. It's either or, and they don't. So you don't exist. According to the Stop the War Coalition, which I think is a criminal position to have, actually. And we have been, last year we were not allowed to join. We will again try this year to have Hands of the People of Iran affiliate to the anti-war movement, because it's such an important issue. I agree with Behrooz. It looks like an attack might be off now for a little bit. They might be postponing it. But it wouldn't be the first time that they're solving an economic crisis by, going to war. It's very good for to have an enemy. And Iran, Ahmadinejad is such a good enemy. You can't make him up. He's using it, of course, for his own benefit, internal to quell internal dissent, and he's playing up to his image as well that America is giving him. Now, my question really to the students is the question of Ahmadinejad and a lot on the people on the left really put forward the idea that Iran is kind of anti-imperialist, because imperialism is attacking Iran, and it's an anti-imperialist country, and therefore we kind of have to support it almost. That anti-imperialists in Britain have to support the anti-imperialist who's fighting against USA. But as I understand it, Iran is very on the forefront of introducing capitalism in Iran, and you kind of talked about that, the kind of measures that the Iranian government is taking to introduce capitalism, and cutting wages and adhering to the very strict conditions that the International Monetary Fund says. You have to have privatizations of public services, you have to save money as much as you can. And if you could talk a bit about this a bit, and if the reformists, Khatami, Rafsanjani, are they really an alternative, and how are they seen by the people of Iran as an alternative or not? They're trying to come back and are supported by imperialism to a large degree. How are they seen by the normal Iranian people? Sorry, it's quite a lot of questions. The reformist question and the anti-imperialism question, I think, are quite important questions.
So anyone else to say anything at the moment? I'll let these comments come back if there's no one particularly wants to ask another question, or just then translate a minute. Yes, comment at the back, sir.
Kihan, the Tehran newspaper sponsored by the Iranian regime, had something named both our speakers, Behrooz and Kaveh Abbasian, and mentioned that they are American and they are having their political activities. I just was interested to see what is their opinion about it, what they say, and whether they have heard about it.
Their political activities, and they're in the paper in Tehran. What do they think about it? Kaveh, do you want to respond first? If there's anyone else to speak, then do raise your hand. Or just a few problems with translation.
We are not sure what you asked. Could you please, sorry, repeat your question again, a bit louder, because we couldn't hear it already.
در روزنامه کیهان از شما بالاخره اسم که در بریتانیا در لندن هستن و سیاسی میکنن به اضافه توضیحاتی که هستن بودن که اولا خبر دارن دوم چه فکر میکنن در موردش چرا اسمشون نوشتن
کیهان لندن یا کیهان ایران؟ Yeah, apparently Kayhan newspaper, which is a sort of solidly pro-Iranian hardline faction of the Iranian regime paper, has mentioned these two students by name in a recent article, saying they are abroad in England, in Britain, and are engaged in political activity. The comrade over there wanted to know their opinion on this article.
فکر کنم که این دوتا سوال شروع کنیم راجبش صحبت کردن تا شاید این مدار یک جلسه هم آبشه بکنیم راحت تر صحبت کنیم. من فکر میکنم در رابطه با سوال اولی که دوست عزیزمون پرسید در واقع اول دیگه دوره این تئوری که دشمن من دوست منه تموم شده. ممکنه با یک پدیده واحد کسان مختلفی مخالف باشن با دلایل مختلف و این از نظر تاریخی و اجتماعی تو جاهای مختلف اتفاق افتاده ولی این اصلا به معنی دقیق کلمه حکومت ایران آنتی امپریالیسم نیست. حکومت ایران ضد آزادیه، آنتی آزادیه. حکومت ایران توش آزادی بیان وجود نداره. حکومت ایران با اینکه آدم‌ها بتونن نوع پوشششون رو انتخاب کنن، اینکه کارگرها بتونن حق تشکل داشته باشن و خیلی چیزای دیگه مشکل داره و عملاً فکر کنم حدود 200 سالی از دنیا عقبه و این یک وجه از حکومت ایرانه و یک وجه دیگه‌ش اینه که عملاً استحکاک منافعی داره تو منطقه خاورمیانه و سعی میکنه خودش رو به عنوان یک قطب منطقه‌ای به اروپا و آمریکا تحمیل کنه برای اینکه رانت اقتصادی بیشتری بگیره که بتونه اقتصادشو بازسازی کنه و این اصلاً هیچ تضاد ساختاری با سرمایه‌داری یا با کشورهای مثل آمریکا و انگلیس نداره، بلکه تنها بحث سر اینه که حکومت ایران و آمریکا و انگلیس به عنوان قدرت منطقه‌ای به صورت واقعی در خاورمیانه به رسمیت بشناسن، همونطور که روسیه رو در شمال آسیا یا در اروپای شرقی میخوان به رسمیت مثلا روسیه معضلی که داره با آمریکا و اینکه میخواد رانت بیشتری سهم بیشتری تو اقتصاد منطقه داشته باشه و بتونه از سرمایه جهانی بیشتر استفاده کنه. ولی نه آنتی امپریالیسمه نه چیزی دیگه. اون چیزی که هست به آزادی ضد خیلی چیزای دیگه است، ضد چیزای انسانیه و از نظر ساختاری و از نظر زیرین‌تر لایه‌های زیرین‌تر اقتصادی هم که نگاه می‌کنید یک رقابت در منطقه خاورمیانه، یک جنگی بین اسلام سیاسی و آمریکا که یک جنبه‌هایش اون جنبه‌هایی که سیاسی و فرهنگی ضد انسانیه و ولی وقتی از اقتصادی زیرین نگاه میکنی یه جنگیه که جمهوری اسلامی میخواد خودش رو به عنوان یک قدرت منطقه‌ای به نظام جهانی اثبات کنه.
Okay, on the question of whether or not the Iranian regime is anti-imperialist. First of all, the period has passed for this type of, ideas that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The Iranian regime is anti-democracy, anti-human rights, anti-freedom of speech, anti-organized, independent organization, but not definitely anti-imperialist. What it's seeking in the region is recognition, in fact, by the imperialist powers being a rentier state, a rentier, class which is ruling over there. He wants a bigger share in the region. And political Islam, the role of political Islam, and the fights with, imperialism in the region are basically designed for that purpose, for recognition by the world capitalist system that this is a legitimate power in the region and it should be given its due share, as it were, of the spoils. In the same way that, the ex-Soviet Union, Russia, is now negotiating a similar type of recognition with the West. It does not, it has no contradiction in terms of its economic and social structures. It has absolutely no contradiction with imperialism or capitalism.
و بخش دوم راجع به نقش هاشمی و خاتمی و یا موقعیت کسانی که در ایران معروف هستند به اصلاح طلبان. یک تحلیل است که تحلیل مفصلی راجع به خواستگاه اینها که شاید برای این جلسه جالب نباشه، اما به هر حال اتفاقی که واقعا افتاده اینه که مردم اطمینان خودشون رو به این نیروها از دست دادن داخل کشور نسبت به انگیزه اونها و اینکه واقعا چقدر راستگو هستند در رابطه با اینکه خواستار گسترش و خواستار باز شدن فضا هستن. مردم ایران به صورت جدی شک دارن نسبت به این مسئله و واقعیت قضیه اینه که خیلی مشکوک به اینا نگاه میکنن.
On the question of the political support or popular support for the reformist wing of the Iranian government, represented by people like Khatami, the ex-president, and Rafsanjani, the president before Khatami, who are presenting themselves as reformists, without wanting to go into details of what they actually stand for, because that's outside the scope of this, short meeting. It has to be stated that people have definitely lost any illusion in any of these, currents. They do not believe that these people are actually there for reforming the state, even what they claim. So there is no evidence to show that, there is any new upsurge of support for such groups. If anything, people have become completely disillusioned with the reformist wing of the Iranian regime.
البته نظرات خود من شخصا نسبت به اون چیزی که گفتم شاید خیلی تندتر باشه، ولی خب چون اگر نظر مردم ایران رو پرسیدم باید میگم حداقل نکته‌ای که روش توافق و نظر اینه که مردم اطمینانشون رو از دست دادن و به شدت مشکوک.
Of course, I myself have a lot sharper, divisions to make with the reformist wing of the Iranian regime and a lot more to say. But since you asked me about the attitude of the Iranian people, towards these factions, I can, just re-emphasize the fact that they have no illusions. They have lost their illusions in these reformist, characters, so-called reformist characters.
And about the second question, about that newspaper, Kayhan, I should say that this newspaper, Kayhan, is a radical fundamentalist newspaper that belongs to pro-government conservative groups. And it's not their first time that they're trying to do that they're writing about us and about our movement. With that kind of news, they're just trying to show and they're just trying to prove that our movement, Students for Freedom and Equality, has been dead. But and they want to show it. They want to show our escaping as a sign for that, as a sign of death. But actually, I think our continuing our struggle for freedom and equality, me, Behrooz, in here, and our comrades in Iran, and continuing to our movement, Students for Freedom and Equality, can prove that they are just lying, and we are their problem, and they want to kill their problem, but they can't do this. We will win.
Can I just add a little point here, just in case some of the comrades may not know this. The movement that the comrades represent, Equality and Freedom, is an openly organized student movement in Iran. It's not an underground organization. Whatever the comrade says here has repercussions for that movement inside, because there are comrades active, involved. And it is obvious why the Iranian regime is showing so much interest. They're trying to find, their own research and find evidence so that they can go and arrest 10 more people, inside. So I think this was why the comrades asked that question. So in case the comrades didn't know, this Equality and Freedom organization or campaign is an open, legal challenge to the Iranian regime. It's not an underground leftist, revolutionary organization. Whatever is political nature, it is open. It is totally open. No, I didn't mean you are not revolutionary or radical. I'm saying it's not an underground, political party. It's an open social movement. And this is one of its actual amazing aspects, I think, given the nature of the repressive nature of the Iranian regime. It's so refreshing in a way that the student movement has become so far radicalized that it's openly challenging and confronting the Iranian regime and facing all the repression and facing all the, repercussions of that challenge. Stuart.
Yeah, just a couple of questions and a contribution, really. The questions really is about what relations the student movement has with the women's movement in Iran, like the Million Signature Campaign, for example, against discrimination, and what relations the student movement has with the workers' movement in Tehran, the bus workers, or any of the workers' struggles in Iran at the moment. And could you tell us something about what effect the repression has had on that movement over the last 2 years, both on the women's movement, because a number of those women have been imprisoned, and the workers' movement as well. So you could just give us some idea of the relationship between the student movement and those other movements. And just one thing I wanted to say about the Stop the War movement, maybe I thought Tina was a little one-sided, because we can't associate totally the Stop the War movement with its leadership, because the Stop the War movement in Britain was a very powerful movement, and it brought 2 million people on the streets before the attack on Iraq. It's certainly declined since, but it was a very active movement. It's active around the war in Afghanistan, and it's therefore quite important. The problem is its leadership is dominated by a combination of the British Communist Party, the Communist Party of Britain, the Stalinist organisation, and the Socialist Workers' Party. And both those organisations take an idea that if a country is under attack by imperialism, that you can't criticise its government. And many people take the same attitude to Cuba, which is under blockade by the United States, and therefore say you can't criticise its regime, and they say the same thing about Iran, and that was the struggle going on inside the Stop the War movement against that position. And I think I'm a member of the steering committee of Hands Off the People of Iran, and I'm in Permanent Revolution. And I think we have tried to say two things. One is we know Iran is under attack by imperialism, and we're fighting to stop the war against Iran via Israel or America itself. We're against the blockade because much of the problems of the economic crisis in Iran are caused by the American blockade of Iran since the overthrow of the Shah. And therefore we've been trying to argue in the Stop the War movement that in fact you can be critical of the Iranian regime and at the same time defend it against war and against the attacks of imperialism. So I mean that's the argument, and to be honest, you can find lots of people in the Stop the War movement who sympathise with that position of ours, but it's a problem of the leadership in the Stop the War movement that prevents that argument from being had out inside the actual organisation.
Thanks, Stuart. Should I take another question? Or?
Nick.
Yeah, hi. I was just keen to first of all, I really thought it was interesting, the emphasis placed on drawing a sharp line, especially where we are at the moment, and we're seeing justifications for attacking Iran coming out from all different areas, including among those who would consider part of the workers' movement, who are now coming out with a similar idea of either targeted strikes or what would essentially need to be nuclear weaponry as a kind of civilizing process. The Iranian Iran needs to go through to reach a stage where it can be then protected by or under the general covenants of US imperialism. I mean, obviously, it's not hard to guess. I mean, just taking a wild guess, I imagine those kind of ideas don't actually have massive currency in Iran. I don't imagine there are many people in Iran saying, oh yeah, that's a great idea, let's have nuclear weaponry attack our major cities, including those that are densely populated by people. But obviously I think it's actually really good that comrades, including in do a plug, including in Communist Student, there's a brilliant quote there that basically the comrades are saying just that, this is impossible, this is a ridiculous idea, we need to draw a line sharply against that. To get more onto my point, I suppose, I think it's really interesting the language the comrades used and the role, the kind of the emphasis they place on drawing precise to that line. And I was kind of interested to kind of learn obviously that's the key way that you can draw that distinction, that's the key way that you can distinguish yourself from those movements that will use the language of freedom and democracy to justify such an attack. So I mean, how is that kind of related, I would argue, or I'm interested in finding out with other kind of political movements within a broader student milieu? How is that served to kind of draw that kind of line? Are there, obviously, I mean, I don't imagine that the students are kind of a homogenous block. There are obviously kind of there are elements that are backed by the government as a way in to reach those students. So yeah, if you could just touch upon that, and obviously it's interesting. I mean, I think the point that you raised is one that applies for us as well in the UK in regards to the need to draw a sharp line. And we've seen it most recently on the Mehdi Kazami demo, where we had the UK government coming out and saying, oh no, this is brilliant, we can support Mehdi, and we're all against attacks on gay minorities. Of course, this is a government that is fairly closely linked to other governments that are actually jailing and hanging gay men and lesbian women. So I think that's a lesson that we can extend to as a part of our worldwide approach to solidarity.
More questions back? Yeah, that's fine.
بیشترش حرف خودش.
مثلا به نظرتون هر جریان رژیم ضد امپریالیسم یا سوسیالیستیه که یکی که مثلا جریان اسلامی که از نظر سیاسی میتونه شعار میدن ضد امپریالیسم بالاخره نظرشون ضد امپریالیستن از سیاسی ضد حکومت اسلامی میخواد یا نه و اینکه رژیم خود رژیم اینا با شعار امپریالیسم اومد سر کار توی ایران و باعث شد یه سری جوانان هم حرفاش دنبالش می‌گفتن. Do you think که این تمام این 30 ساله شهادت رو بود که از سیاست تبعیض نیست؟
Shall I translate Samir's question? What the comrade was asking is, do you think anybody who is anti-imperialist is also progressive and revolutionary? I don't mean it in the economic sense. I understand that, some people may economically not be against imperialism, but when they are politically against imperialism, does that give them some credibility? Does that make them progressive and revolutionary? If I understood correct. Secondly, given the fact that the slogan of Iranian Revolution was itself in '79 was anti-imperialism, are you saying we have been living through a lie for the last 30 years? And I hope I got your question.
سوالم اون رفیق میکرد اونجا این بود که اینجا یه عده‌ای میگن که مثلا اینا که دموکراسی طلب و غیرن که ایران لازم داره یه جنگی از خارج برای اینکه مردم رو نجات بدیم و متمدنشون کنیم و این روزا خیلی از بخشایی از حتی جنبش کارگری هم میگین حتی این شعار و این تیپ بحثا رو برداشته که مثلا یه نیوکلیار پرسایز نیوکلیار رو حتی attack on Iran, you can get rid of the regime and free the people. و تشکر که از این شما تو صحبت قبلیتون دقیقا به این اشاره کردید که مردم ایران همچین چیزی رو نمیخوان. میخواست این رو یه ذره تو اینو باز کن. فهمیدی؟ سوال اون آقا.
سوال اون دوست عزیزمون آخر.
آخری ها این آقا هم که خوش معرفی که مال پرمننت رولوشنه میخواست بیشتر بدون رابطه جنبش دانشجویی با جنبش زنان به خصوص کمپین 1 میلیون امضا و جنبش کارگری چیه و آیا این روابط و این موج بسیار دستگیری های اخیر دلیل پشتش چیه توی هم جنبش زنان هم کارگری هم دانشجویی. بیشتر میخواست به ارتباط بین جنبش دانشجویی، جنبش زنان و جنبش کارگریش. سالون خانمم که پاسوی.
I'm going to answer the first question, but I think I can do it in English. So
best way to practice.
I have to say it in Persian and Farsi, yeah? Okay. در ارتباط جنبش دانشجویی با جنبش زنان و کارگران سوال پرسیدن رفیقمون. باید بگم که تا به حال یعنی تا همین چند سال گذشته این ارتباط به هیچ عنوان توی جنبش دانشجویی و بین جنبش‌های اصیل اجتماعی ایران این ارتباط به هیچ عنوان وجود نداشته تا همین 3-4 سال گذشته.
In terms of the relationship between the student movement and other social movements like women and workers movement, it has to be said that up until 3-4 years ago, no such links existed whatsoever.
این ارتباط از وقتی شروع شد که جنبش چپ توی جنبش دانشجویی ایران پا گرفت و بخش چپ جنبش دانشجویی ایران دارای قدرت شد.
These links began to develop as soon as the left began to dominate within the student movement. Because as I explained in my introduction, the student movement has gone through a huge, period of repression and ideological brainwashing, basically. And then illusion in Khatami. What Comrade is referring to is that it's only in the last 3-4 years that the left has begun to dominate the student movement. And as soon as that influence of the left began to grow, these links have begun to develop.
و در واقع جنبش دانشجویی به عنوان یک عاملی برای ارتباط هرچه بیشتر این جنبش‌های اجتماعی با هم دیگه عمل کرد.
In fact, the student movement has now become one of the key factors in linking other social movements. It itself is helping other social movements to link with each other.
و افتخار ما به عنوان دانشجویان آزادی‌خواه و برابری طلب اینه که برای اولین بار شعارهای طبقه کارگر رو به داخل دانشگاه بردیم و سعی کردیم به صورت عملی هم این ارتباط رو عملی کنیم و در تشکیل کمیته‌های کارگری، تشکل‌های مستقل کارگری با کارگران همراهی داشته باشیم، در اعتصاب‌هاشون، در تحصناشون شرکت کنیم که چندین بار هم به همین دلایل دستگیر شدیم. تعداد زیادی از دانشجویان آزادیخواه و برابری طلب.
And in fact, we've seen the campaign or the tendency, the student current called equality and freedom. Our pride is in the fact that we were the first to introduce workers' demand inside the universities. And we have defended and participated in many of the protests of the working class and other social layers. And this is in fact one of the reasons which has led to this huge wave of arrests of the students.
و همچنین در ارتباط با جنبش زنان هم برای اولین بار پیش قدم شدیم. با بخش چپ جنبش زنان توی ایران ارتباط گرفتیم و در فعالیت‌هایی که برای آزادی هرچه بیشتر زنان، برای برابری حقوق بین مرد و زن انجام میشه توی ایران، جنبش دانشجویی رو دخیل کردیم به عنوان یکی از بالهای قدرتمند جنبش زنان در ایران.
We've done the same with the women's movement. We were probably the first to build links with the left wing of the Iranian women's movement, and we have managed to, link many of their demands to our demands within the student movement.
ولی به طور مشخص با کمپین 1 میلیون امضا ارتباط چندانی به صورت ارگانیک برقرار نکردیم.
But we don't have a sort of organic links with the campaign for women's campaign for 1 million signature directly. It's the left wing of the women's movement, not with the 1 million signature campaign.
که اون به دلیل نقدهای خاصی بود که بر این چنین حرکت‌های اجتماعی سیاسی داشتیم.
The reason behind that is because we are critical of this organization. We have certain criticism of political criticism of this organization.
در رابطه با سرکوب این جنبش‌ها هم باید بگم که هر جنبشی که توی ایران، هر جنبش اصیلی اجتماعی که توی ایران که بخواد به حقوق حقیقی خودش دست پیدا کنه، که بخواد برای اون آزادی‌های خودش، بخواد برای تشکیل تشکل‌های مستقل خودش تلاش کنه، به صورت ذاتی دولت ایرانه، ذاتی حکومت ایرانه که این جنبش‌ها رو سرکوب کنه. و این طبیعیه که جنبش زنان و جنبش کارگری به عنوان دو تا از جنبش‌های اصیل اجتماعی که توی ایران دارن فعالیت میکنن و در سالهای اخیر فعالیتشون خیلی بیشتر از قبل شده و رهبران و سازمان دهنده‌های خودشون رو پرورش دادن، با سرکوب وسیعی روبرو میشن.
It is only natural for every social movement in Iran which demands justice and freedom to be confronted with repression by this repressive regime. This is no surprise. The Iranian regime would repress any social movement, including women's and workers' movement who have had demands for equality and independent organization. It's no surprise that the Iranian regime would, confront these movements with mass arrests.
و این فقط دانشجویان نیستن که الان توی زندانن، بلکه فعالینی از جنبش زنان و جنبش کارگری نیست هستن که توی زندان هستن.
It's not only student activists who are now in jail. A lot of women activists and workers activists are already in jail.
در رابطه با پاسخ سوال این دوست عزیزمون، راستش اول باید یه معذرت خواهی بکنم، چون که نمیتونم اونطور که میخوام جواب بدم، به خاطر اینکه خیلی از دوستانم ایران هستن و ترجیح میدم وارد یک سری مباحث نشم. اما این سوال رو سعی میکنم به هر حال تا اونجا که ممکنه توضیح بدم. اونم این که من همونطور که تو پاسخ اولیه هم گفتم که ممکنه با یه پدیده واحد کسان زیادی مخالف باشن. این مخالفت واقعیه، این مخالفت نمیشه انکار کرد، ولی باید دید بار معنایی که به اینا اطلاق میشه یعنی چی، چون هر کلمه، هر اصطلاحی یه سنتی داره، یعنی خارج از اون اینکه اون کلمه دقیقاً تو دیکشنری چه معنی میده تو ادبیات سیاسی یک باری داره. به خاطر همین من کلمه ضد امپریالیسم رو برای حکومت‌های مثل ایران قبول ندارم. به یه معنی همین اواخر جنگ گرجستان و روسیه بود. خب گرجستان لابد ضد روسیه است به نوعی، ولی خب آیا این ضد امپریالیسم روسیه است؟ یا یه دوره بین آرژانتین و انگلستان یه جنگی بود سر جزایر فالکلند، آیا اون موقع بعد میگفتیم که چون اینا سر این جزایر جنگ دارن آرژانتین ضد امپریالیسمه؟ من فکر نمی کنم که
فنش ترجمه کنم.
بله.
Don't go too far.
As I said in my earlier answer to the question, a number of different people, this is a reply to the question about the anti-imperialist nature of the Iranian regime that the comrade over there asked. He says, as I said earlier, many different people may confront an issue or oppose an issue. It doesn't mean their opposition is superficial. It may have plenty of reasons for that opposition. But what you have to look at is the content of that opposition, the reasons for that opposition. Especially with a term like anti-imperialism. Okay, there is some maybe dictionary definition of what is anti-imperialism, but in political movements it has a certain, historical definition which we cannot ignore. In that sense, I do not consider the Iranian regime anti-imperialist. It's in that sense that I'm saying I don't mean they don't oppose each other. They don't have different interests or they don't have conflict. For example, look at the situation in Georgia. Just because the Georgians and the Russians are confronting each other, does it mean Georgia is now anti-imperialist? Does it mean, Georgia suddenly become anti-imperialist? Or when General Galtier in Argentina, opposed the British over Falkland Island, over Maldives, over the, you remember the Argentine War. Does it mean, Argentina suddenly become anti-imperialist? So you have to define what we mean by anti-imperialism.
و الان حکومت ایران واقعا با آمریکا مشکل داره توی این منطقه، ولی نه لزوما با آلمان مشکلی داره، نه لزوما با انگلیس مشکلی داره، بلکه گفتم همونطور که بحثم تو قسمت اول بهش اشاره کردم، به نظر من جنگ اصلی، بحث اصلی که هست سر اینه که جمهوری اسلامی میخواد خودشو به عنوان یک قدرت منطقه‌ای و واقعا موجود به اروپا و آمریکا تحمیل کنه و بگی که من یک قدرت موجود هستم توی این منطقه و اگر کسی میخواد توی این منطقه کار اقتصادی بکنه، روابط سیاسی داشته باشه، باید منو به عنوان یک قطب بپذیره، به عنوان یک قدرت منطقه‌ای. و آمریکا و اسرائیل هم مشخصا اینو نمیپذیرن و میخوان که یک حکومت کاملا دست نشانده توی ایران سر کار بیارن و به هر حال بین این دو تا درگیری هست. این درگیری واقعیه ولی به معنی نه ضد امپریالیسم نه چیزی. من خارج از حتی این به هر حال حکومت، من یه دوره که توی زندان بودم ما را مشهور کرده بودن با یکی از این اعضای القاعده برای اینکه به من فشار بیارن، چون میدونستن عقاید من چجوریه. یکی از این اعضای القاعده رو گذاشته بودن با ما که این توی افغانستان با آمریکایی جنگیده بود، یعنی اصلا تو اون چیز بود، ولی دیدگاهش این بود که این نیروهای نظامی و این سرمایه‌داری آمریکایی باید از مناطق اسلامی خارج بشن، این پول و غیر مستقیم بیان و مالیات اسلامی بدن، هیچ ایرادی نداره. دیدگاه اینا در این حده، نه هیچ خصلت دیگه ای داره. ولی میشه چیزهای دیگه چیز کرد. اون چیزی که اونها مخالفشن، اون مخالفت با مدرنیسم، مخالفت با دستاوردهای روشنگری هست، خیلی چیزهای دیگه هستش که میشه آورد و ردیف کرد. یعنی فقط یک اون خصلتی که شاید شما اشاره میخواد بکنید، اینکه این مسئله فقط یک رقابت سیاسی نیست، جنبه‌های اجتماعی و عمیق‌تری هم داره از نظر فرهنگی که اونو من قبول دارم، ولی باز جمهوری اسلامی جزء کاتگوری ضد امپریالیسم نیست.
My mom had some relationship with some fish, I think. Iranian regime, as I said in my earlier reply, has a real conflict with US imperialism, in the sense that the Iranian regime is saying, I'm a regional power, you have to recognize me. Any political or economic, dealing and wheeling you want to do in the region, I'm one of those to come and consult and recognize. This is a real conflict. But USA and Israel, no, they want, as before, a very servile, quiet, tool of manipulation over there. So that's the nature of the conflict. The fact is very obvious. The Iranian regime doesn't have a similar conflict with French imperialism, with British imperialism, or with German imperialism, but with US imperialism. So, but this does not, give it the characteristic of what we call anti-imperialism. That has to be, taken from many different, there are many aspects to this definition of anti-imperialism. He also referred to his experience when he was imprisoned recently in Iran, that in order to put pressure on these, comrades, they would put them in the same cell as Al-Qaeda prisoners, Bin Laden, because a number of Bin Laden supporters arrested in Iran under pressure from, USA. These are not his words. I'm just sort of adding little information. Before they were, using Al-Qaeda agents, inside Iran for their purpose. Now they have put 3 of them in jail to keep the Americans quiet. So they put him in a cell, with, just to put more pressure on him. They knew how much he would hate, being in the same cell as an Al-Qaeda agent. And he says, we had a number of conversations, we had lots of talk with these guys. And their problem was they would, fight, and he was a guy who had fought the American, army and American imperial. But his thing was, if, Americans give the correct, Islamic, dues, there's no problem, we have no problem. If, every capitalist has to give certain due to this, religious hierarchy. It's a sort of religious tax, as it were. If they do that, we have no problem. So the content of their opposition to USA is, totally reactionary. Is based on, reactionary ideas and ideologies, of many years ago.
Thank you.
Question from Jojo.
Iran is.
Sorry, I'll take it. Sorry, it's two questions here. I'll take it.
We've talked a lot about the two oppositions that you face of inside and outside, internal and external. If the threat of external invasion and intervention from the US and from whoever else in the Western capitalist world was effectively removed, how do you think the Iranian people would react? Would they focus more on internal revolutionizing of their bureaucracy and the state power, or so does it provide a focus away from it, or is that just sort of something that's not going to change?
Did you ask me or that? فهمیدی سوالشون؟ میگه اگه این خطر جنگ، این تهدید برداشته بشه، اثرش روی جنبش های مردمی چیه؟ آیا مردم بیشتر جنبش علیه رژیم رو تقویت میکنن یا نه؟ اثر این چی خواهد بود اگه خطر جنگ برداشته بشه؟
سوال بعدی رو
The next question. Okay. What's the next question?
Okay. I want to sort of say something on my own behalf, but also ask a question of the comrades there. think we've had a very interesting discussion this evening, and it's been very illuminating for me. Just recently, discussions were focusing a bit on the content and meaning of anti-imperialism, and for me, I think that's a very important discussion for us to have. And I think the comrades are beginning to put their finger on the nub of the issue, which is that that there will be conflicts between states, and that especially in the current period where the United States is going to feel that its hegemony is under threat, precisely because its hegemony in part is predicated on the dollar being strong and being the currency in which goods are exchanged. Now, given all the challenges that the dollar is facing now and that Wall Street is facing, that pillar of US strength in the world is going to be under threat, and there is a danger that the United States will lash out, will react in all kinds of ways to try and sustain its position in the world. We don't know what's going to happen in the coming months and years, and obviously that places Iran under additional threat. And there's going to be all kinds of conflicts as a result of that. And we see not only is Iran facing increased threats, but Russia is as well, and that's been mentioned by the comrades. So it is possible in one sense to say that these nations are in conflict with US imperialism, and that if we want to weaken US imperialism in the world, then we should support Russia and Iran. But I think you've made it clear that that is a ridiculous position for us, for those of us who are on the side of the people and of the workers in Iran and Russia. To take that position, that is just not a position that we can adopt. But it is, and Stuart was pointing out that there's some of the leaders of the anti-war tend to take that position. So I think we have got to examine very closely what exactly is the content of real anti-imperialism, and to what extent, and for the last 100 years it's had lots of meanings, but I think that democratic content is the key issue, and democracy is the key issue. Both the issue of democracy in the world as a whole and the balance of power between nations, and the fact that we don't support one nation, the United States, or any other combination of nations dominating the global political structures. And we also raise democratic demands in Russia and Iran itself. So I think that's the kind of lever that we can use to adopt a principled and correct position that is in favour of workers and people internationally and domestically all around the world. Because don't forget that any regime, even if I've sort of been aware of struggles going on in Africa, and lots of regimes in Africa which were strongly supported by the West, as soon as those leaders like Moi in Kenya or Mobutu in Zaire were abandoned by the United States or the West, they sort of started spouting all kinds of anti-imperialist rhetoric and all that kind of thing to try and strengthen their position domestically. So the most unprincipled tyrant is quite capable of using anti-imperialism as a rhetorical tool to support their position. We have to be careful about that. That's all I wanted to say as far as my own thinking is concerned. But I just wonder if the comrades could just sometimes our understanding of what's going on in Iran is quite abstract. And I was wondering if we'd I'd be interested in getting slightly more of a flavour of what the situation is like on the ground. Perhaps if you could, I'd be quite interested, I'm not sure if there's time, but if there's time you could describe how you personally came to be on the left, and what was your personal political journey that brought you to the position that you're in now, and also in terms of the balance of forces in Iran. What kind of response do you get amongst other students to the demands that you raise, and also amongst the Iranians as a whole? Do you get the feeling how popular is the regime? How popular is the kind of opposition that you raise? Some sort of, if you could give some flavour of that, it would be quite interesting, I think.
یه مقدار که اولش توضیح داد که صحبتشون براش خیلی جالب بود، این که بعد دولت ها ممکنه با هم وارد اختلاف و جنگ بشن، ولی الزاما دلیلش این نیست که یکیشون ممکنه مثلا مترقی تر از اون یکی باشه یا غیره، به خصوص شرایطی که هژمونی مثل آمریکا در خطره که متکی به دلار قوی، ممکنه که خیلی ماجرا بیشتر و بیشتر هم بشه. و شاید یه نکته‌ای که ما باید روش تأکید بذاریم مسئله دموکراسی در سطح بین‌المللی، که دموکراسی به معنی رابطه بین دولت‌ها و اینکه چرا چند تا دولت باید غلبه کنن تو ساختارهای سیاسی جهانی و چه دموکراسی درون این کشور. این خب نظرش راجع به این مسئله انجام دادیم. دومیش سوال مستقیما شما بود که من این ریپورت ها چیزا راجع به ایران میکنیم هنوز برای ما خیلی تجریدیه، نمیدونیم دقیق اونجا چه خبره. برای من خیلی جالب تره که مثلا ای وقت بود که گفت شاید وقت نباشه، ای وقت بود جزئیات بیشتر از تجربه خودتون رو برام بگید. تجربه که آره چجوری چپ شدین، مبارزه چیه، این چپی بودن در دانشگاه چه معنی داره، تا چه اندازه چپی ها تو دانشگاه بسیار رهبری رو در دست دارن، اثر این رو سایر دانشجوها چیه. بسیار آره این تو اگه وقت نداشتیم ندید میگه برای چیز کردیم.
This one, America has a problem with Iran. I think that's the main problem because of the Islamic country. At the same time, now in the world generally, there is a sympathy to Islam. Some schools you can see in the books, children reading about Islam. And England last 2 weeks ago, there was Sharia system they tried to. Don't you see the confusing part, because people knows that America.
Can you speak up a little? Sorry.
Yeah, I finished the question.
اوکی.
فهمیدی سوالشو؟
بگید دقیق
که اوکی مثلا جنگ به ایران و فلان اینا و این باعث شده که اسلام مثلا اسلام هم مطرح بشه. فرم انگلیس مثلا اسلام خیلی مثلا با عنوان چیز ضد امپریالیسم پاپولار داره بشه دیگه. ها؟ نظرتون چیه مثلا راجع به این سیچویشن؟
من سال اول باز دوشون تجربه سوال
next question from
دو تا سوال بود.
Do you want to ask the question now or do you want to
Probably they won't have a lot more time. Probably we can take on one more.
3 more speakers.
3 more speakers.
Yeah, that's it.
So let them answer these first.
Okay.
Otherwise,
this can answer.
Yeah. If there is 2-3 more, we can answer this batch.
من البته پیش میکنم که ایشون صحبت کنه، چه فکر کنم ایشون
ایرانیه.
2-3 تا
موندن. 2-3 تا موندن. شما این بچه این سری رو جواب بدین، 2-3 تا هنوز موندن که سوال داره. بعد زیاد میشه.
اثر خطر جنبه. آره
این سواله.
آره.
The first question. Again, اگر خطر جنگ در بررسی دولت‌های مثل دولت ایران یک خصلت‌های ویژه‌ای که این دولت‌ها دارن رو باید مد نظر قرار بدیم. یکی از خصلت‌های ویژه دولت جمهوری اسلامی ایران و حکومت جمهوری اسلامی ایران نیاز دائمیش به دشمنه. یه نیازی که از اول از همون لحظه‌ای که زاده شده، لحظه‌ای که بعد از انقلاب حالا شکست خورده ایران روی کار اومده تا به حال این یکی از چیزهایی که بر اساسش مستقر شده تو ایران این اعلام این که ما توی شرایطی هستیم که شرایط اضطراری هستیم که تعداد زیادی دشمن داریم، تو شرایط جنگی هستیم و تولید دشمن برای خودش.
One specific characteristic, this is in reply to your question. One of the specific characteristics of the Iranian regime, which has to be taken into account, is one of the main planks of its rule is create crisis. One of the ways it has ruled all throughout these years is by constantly creating crisis and an external enemy. By, creating enemies, it can justify repression.
و از این مسئله برای سرکوب جنبش‌های اجتماعی که توی کشور وجود داره و برای آزادی و برابری و رفاه بیشتر دارن تلاش میکنن استفاده میکنن.
And it uses this threat of enemies, these dangers from outside, as a justification for suppression of social movements and opposition to its own rule. And it's been doing this throughout this period.
که همین مسئله رو میتونیم برای دولتی مثل آمریکا هم مثال بزنیم که تا یه دوره جنگ سرد شوروی رو دشمنش خودش معرفی میکرد و پس از فروپاشی شوروی الان یه چیز دیگه به نام القاعده اسلام رو به عنوان دشمن اصلی خودش داره معرفی میکنه که بتونه تو سیاست‌های جهانیش تأثیر داشته باشه.
And in fact the same could be said about US government. As it used, Soviet Union in the old days as a justification for all sorts of, measures, and now is, using Al-Qaeda or threat of Islam in the Middle East to do exactly the same.
و این به نظر من خیلی آشکاره که اگر این خطر جنگ و این خطر دشمن چه توی ایران و چه توی کشوری مثل آمریکا با دولت آمریکا برداشته بشه، فرصت بی‌نظیری برای رشد هرچه بیشتر جنبش‌های اجتماعی.
And of course, when such machinations are removed from the scene, when there is no such threat from the foreign enemy, then obviously there'll be more room for social movements and opposition to this regime. The same in Iran as it could be in USA. Short answer.
و منم دو تا پاسخ کوتاه بدم در رابطه با سوال دوست عزیزمون. من دو تا جواب میتونم بدم، یه جواب خیلی بلند که همه اینا رو توضیح بدم و یه جواب کوتاه. و من اینجا میتونم جواب کوتاه رو بدم، اونم این که ایران یه جامعه کاملا پویاست و مثل هر جامعه دیگه دیدگاه‌های مختلفی داره، نظرات مختلفی داره و مسلماً اون چیزایی هم که امروز من صحبت کردم یک بخش از نظرات و یکی از جنبش‌هایی که در ایران حضور داره. اما یک چیز رو میتونم بگم و اونم این که در ایران داره رادیکالیسم و دیدگاه‌های تغییر طلب در حال رشد.
Of course, Iranian society, this is in reply to Stuart's question or your question, right? We see in Iran, like any other country, it's a dynamic society. There are many different ideas and currents, already active in the political and social movement. And what I'm saying here represents only one such current, not necessarily every current, including all those currents opposing the Iranian regime. But nevertheless, what can be said, quite definitely and firmly, is that radical currents and currents seeking fundamental change are gaining the upper hand within the social movements.
در آخر معذرت میخوام واسه اینکه جواب خیلی کوتاه شد.
I apologize for such a short answer.
و و در رابطه باز با سوال این دوست عزیزمون که این هم به نظر من بحث خیلی پیچیده ایه، چون باید رابطه اسلام و دولت‌های غربی، رابطه‌ای که این دوتا داشتن و توی دهه‌های اخیر قرن گذشته بررسی کرد. دهه 70 میلادی، دهه 80 و دهه 90 و در هر کدوم از این دوره‌ها این نقش و این رابطه تغییراتی داشته و این دولت‌های مختلف که در اروپا بودن روابط مختلفی برقرار کردن. ولی در اساس میتونم بگم که اسلام نقش ضد امپریالیستی نداره، هرچند با جنبه‌های دیگه‌ای از غرب درگیره که جنبه‌های در رابطه با مدرنیسم و در رابطه با مسائلی که بعد از دوره روشنگری توی اروپا به دست اومد. من فکر میکنم که اینها چالش‌های اصلیه که بین اسلام و چالش واقعیه که وجود داره، ولی ممکنه که در حالتهای مختلف سیاسی نقش مختلفی به عهده بگیره، ولی در کل به نظر من پدیده جالبی نیست.
منظورت از این رابطه دوره گذشته که آمریکا اینا مثلا اینا رو
آره مثلا نقش دوره توی افغانستان تحولات خاصی داشتیم یا همین الان تفاوتی که بین عربستان هست و ایران.
Relationship between Islam and the West has undergone many changes. What you have to look at is the last, say, 2 or 3 decades before the new century. I think I confirm this is what he was trying to refer to. The fact that imperialism during the Cold War find an ally within the Islamic currents has, not helped the current situation. So when you look at the rise in Islamic currents, even as you mentioned in Britain, that some people are identifying it, you have to look at this history also, how imperialism actually encouraged and helped and assisted this type of currents when it could use them against the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But as far as the content of the current opposition of Islamic currents in the Middle East, like Iranian regime to Western values is concerned, it is basically the same problems the church had here before the Enlightenment. The problems you resolved during the Enlightenment in Europe, we still haven't resolved this Islam in the Middle East. So that's the actual contextual nature of the conflict between these two sets of values. It hasn't gone through, and we haven't gone through Reformation or Enlightenment yet. But of course, he said we could go a lot further into this, but lack of time again.
Great. Another any questions?
Mine is, I'm also from HOPI's steering committee. A comment and then a question. A comment, I just want to remind ourselves here. Shall I translate as I go ahead or?
Be my guest.
I just want to remind ourselves that this is a very special day and it's a very special occasion that we have gathered here today. It has a special significance. من فقط توضیح دارم میدم که به یاد داشته باشیم که امروز روز خاصیه که اینجا جمع شدیم. And the reason is that I think it could have been drastically different. We could have been here to condemn the regime for executing 2 activists from the student movement. And I'm really pleased that that's not the case. And we are here, and I'm really pleased that they are alive and they have managed to escape and be with us so that they can tell a little bit of the story of what's happening in Iran to the students and obviously to people in general.
احتیاج هست ترجمه کنم یا متوجه هستید که دارم میگم که در حقیقت توضیح میدم که این به راحتی میتونه سناریویی باشه متفاوت که ما اینجا الان نشستیم محکوم داریم میکنیم رژیمی رو که 2 تا دانشجوی اکتیویست رو کشته ولی باید خوشحال باشیم که این الان این نیست. And the reason I emphasize it is because I think that we should use this opportunity when we leave this room all the time to remind ourselves of what we can do now that we've heard the story and we know that the struggle is continuing in Iran. And they mentioned already that while they are here, other students are being arrested all the time. We are getting now the news that in the last few weeks, because obviously the new academic year has started, there have been lots of arrests and a lot of students are now in prison. What could we do when we leave this room? Still to continue thinking about the imprisoned students in Iran, especially for those of you, who are students in other universities. What could you do? What thought could you take from this meeting when you leave? You say that what you could do in your own university, in your own institution, to continue supporting the students who are in Iran and need our support. I really want us to leave this room with this reminder and to think about it and see how we could continue our support for those who are still in Iran and weren't fortunate enough to escape and be with us. فکر میکنم که متوجه شدید. Now my question, what is your message to the anti-war movement? Clearly, Tina, I think, mentioned that very clearly that what they are inviting us in the anti-war movement is to keep quiet about what's happening in Iran because they think that there is now a bigger threat which is called imperialism. And we shouldn't talk about student movements because we shouldn't talk about women's movement, we shouldn't talk about workers' movement in Iran because if we do, it's going to weaken our position against imperialism. Now you are here, and the evidence of that movement in Iran, the real movement in Iran, and you have clearly explained your position that it is possible to be against any imperialist intervention as well as being on the side of the people and demanding your rights from the regime and fighting against this repression. What is your message to the anti-war movement? سوال من روشنه. سوال من اینه که پیام شما به جنبش ضد جنگ در بریتانیا چی هستش؟ جنبشی که ما رو دعوت میکنه که سکوت بکنیم در مقابل اجحافاتی و سرکوب رژیم، سکوت بکنیم بگیم که جنبش دانشجویی وجود نداره، سکوت بکنیم بگیم جنبش زنان وجود نداره و جنبش کارگری وجود نداره. پیام صریح و روشن شما به این جنبش ضد جنگ چیه؟
So relating to this question...
Yeah, can I take you again, because we've got some other speakers, so I'll...
to get the same...
Sure, same question, yeah. Speak a bit, sorry. Yeah.
آیا طرفدارشون هستین آیا ضدشون say in English as well. Yeah, there's Karimizadeh Azadi party in Iran who is not accepted in the government. I just wanted to see what their relationship, the student struggles relationship with this party is.
Nehzat Azadi is a movement for democracy. This is a sort of what I would call a more liberal religious grouping. The leader of whom is dead, and he was the first prime minister after the overthrow of the Shah. Bazargan, if some of the comrades remember, the first prime minister we had after the overthrow of the Shah was the leader of this party. Then, during the US hostage crisis and the US embassy takeover in Iran, he was ousted from government. Now, this part is actually, although still active, is semi-officially illegal. So it's, just for the comments so they know what Nehzat Azad is.
Take one more and then. Another question, Bashir, and I'll take another question for you then.
Well, it is a comment actually.
Okay, sorry.
It's just on this idea of anti-imperialist regimes. You see, there aren't anti-imperialist capitalist regimes, but there are regimes that take anti-imperialist actions. And I think, you see, when Galtieri, who was a reactionary Argentinian dictator, seized the Malvinas from the British, that was an anti-imperialist action, and a perfectly supportable action, because the British used the Falklands, Malvinas, as a strategic base against Latin America, the Antarctica, its oil, etc. And that's why British imperialism keeps it. Throwing the British out of the Malvinas was a progressive action. It doesn't mean we supported Galtieri. And I think the same could be said of Khomeini. We knew in 1979 that Khomeini was a reactionary cleric and an anti-working class sort of leader, but he led a progressive struggle to overthrow the Shah. And therefore, he took a progressive anti-imperialist action to get rid of an American agent. So I think we can support such actions without characterizing these regimes as anti-imperialist regimes. And I think if the current Iranian regime fought back against an Israeli or American attack, that would be a progressive action and we should support.
Comment sure.
So we are going towards the Third World War because of, if you see the economic crisis. But what the system says is it's only money, it's not economical collapse. But it's all lie. We are going towards the Third World War. And imperialism, capitalism is finished. They can't work anymore. Because they were doing casino capitalism. Casino capitalism is the end of the capitalism, which is imperialism. Now, if imperialism lost, then Iran regime is they are they will get more powerful because they were against American capitalism. Now, if we think that imperialism finished, what would happen? What do you think?
حقیقتش منم درست نفهمم برای که جفنگی که ولی بحثش اینه که خطر جنگی هست، خطر جنگ جهانی هست، ولی اگر حالا فرض کنیم امپریالیسم دیفیت بشه در جنگ با ایران، آیا مثلا این خطر جنگ های امپریالیستی رو کمتر میکنه؟ یه جوری میخواد سوال بحث اون دوستمونم فهمیدی دیگه، بحث استوارت هم فهمیدی؟
آره دیگه، اونم که گفت اون یه عمل ضد امپریالیستی،
رژیم ضد امپریالیستی سرمایه‌داری نداریم، ولی عمل ضد امپریالیستی یه رژیم سرمایه‌داری هم میتونه بکنه. مثلا مثال زدی آژامی اون جزیره رو گرفتن، درسته گالتیری ارتجاعی غیر ذالک، ولی امر پس گرفتن اون جزیره از انگلیس مثلا این پروگرسیو اکت و ما باید دفاع کنیم. یه مثال هم راجع به همین ماجرا رژیم ایران میخواست نظر منم خودم هم یه جواب بعد به اون سوالش کنم.
راجع به سوال اول که راجع به پیام به جنبش ضد جنگ بریتانیا بوده، من همونطور که اول حرفام هم گفتم، یکی از محورهای اصلی بحث، یکی از مواضع اصلی دانشجویان آزادیخواه و برابری طلب مخالفت با جنگ بوده. یعنی به تعریفی که ما خودمون از معنای ضد جنگ بودن داریم، ما دانشجویان آزادیخواه و برابری طلب ضد جنگ هستیم.
in reply to Azar's question of what is your message to the anti-war movement here, I have to say we as members of the Students for Equality and Freedom, as I explained in my opening remarks, one of our main planks of our demands is an anti-war position. So without, being anti-war, we cannot be for democracy, for equality, for any of those other things.
و بر این اعتقادیم که ضد جنگ بودن نه به معنای حمایت از یک دولت سرکوبگر که حالا به هر دلیلی با یک دولت امپریالیست توی موقعیت ویژه قرار گرفته است، بلکه به معنی ضد جنگ بودن از سر ضد مردمی بودن جنگه. حمایت ما نه از دولتی مثل دولت جمهوری اسلامی که به اعتقاد خودمون یک دولت سرکوبگره، بلکه حمایت ما از مردمیه که توسط این دولت تحت سرکوب هستن و همچنین خطر جنگ احتمالی امپریالیستی زندگیشون و معیشتشون رو و تمام هست و نیستشون رو تهدید میکنه.
And the reason we oppose the war, we are against any threat of war or any real war in the region, is not in the sense of defending this repressive regime against any threat of foreign war. The sanctions and the war has caused hardship and misery for the population. In defense of the Iranian people, we oppose the threat of war, not in defense of the Iranian regime.
و همچنین اعتقاد داریم که موضع گیری و طرز فکری که صرفاً دولت‌ها رو نگاه میکنه، صرفاً حکومت‌ها رو نگاه میکنه و صرفاً رابطه سیاسی بین حکومت‌ها رو نگاه میکنه، هیچگاه نمیتونه طرز فکری باشه که بتونه یک جنبش اجتماعی واقعی، یک انقلاب مردمی واقعی رو سازمان بده و بتونه یک جامعه‌ای بسازه که برای اون مردم قابل قبول باشه، اون مردم بتونن توش آزاد و برابر زندگی کنن، بلکه در نهایت میتونه به یکی از طرفین مذاکرات سیاسی بین کشورها و دولت‌ها تبدیل بشه. گفتم که نگاهی که صرفاً دولت‌ها و حکومت‌ها رو می‌بینه هیچ وقت نمی‌تونه یک جنبش و یک انقلاب رو سازمان بده، بلکه صرفاً طرف این مذاکره با دولت‌ها.
The whole approach which looks at conflict from the angle of the conflict between states always forgets how these conflicts affect the social movement and the actual population.
و ما برای ضد جنگ بودن همون سیاستی رو پیش میگیریم، همون نگاهی رو داریم و به همون طریقی موضع گیری میکنیم که برای سازمان دادن جنبش‌های اصیل اجتماعی، برای سازماندهی جنبش دانشجویی و برای شکلگیری و سازماندهی شدن اعتراضات مردم از پایین داریم این مواضع رو میگیریم.
And in fact, our opposition to the war is exactly identical with our emphasis on why you should build a movement from below, why the people's movement should be, organized and strengthened in order, to resolve both the conflict with the Iranian regime and the threat of war.
ما طرف مردم و طبقه کارگر رو میگیریم، نه طرف سرکوبگرانشون، چه دولت جمهوری اسلامی باشه، چه دولت آمریکا، چه هر چیز دیگه.
We take the side of the Iranian people, Iranian workers, not the side of those people who suppress it and oppress it, be it Iranian regime or US imperialism.
راجب سوال بعدی که راجب نهضت آزادی پرسیده شد.
که آیا شما عضو هستید؟
والا من نمیدونم دلیل مطرح شدن این سوال توی این جلسه نمیدونم چیه، ولی به صورت مشخص چندین بار گفتیم، باز هم میگیم، چه داخل چه خارج هیچ سازمان، هیچ حزبی، هیچ گروهی نیست که ما کوچکترین عضویتی یا ارتباط سازمانی و ارگانیکی باهاش داشته باشیم و توی جناح‌های داخل ایران به خصوص نهضت آزادی به دلیل پیشینه سیاسی که داره توی ایران چیزی نیستش که جنبش چپ بخواد توی ایران ازش حمایت کنه یا باهاش ارتباط سازمانی داشته باشه.
In reply to the question over there about his membership of his Nehzat al freedom movement. He said, as we have said many times in many interviews and on many occasions, we do not have, organic links with any political parties, whether inside or outside. We are not members of any political parties, let alone the freedom movement, which because of its political past and political history, there's absolutely no way a left current can associate itself with, freedom movement.
و این دو تا سوالم من سعی میکنم جواب بدم. در رابطه با سوالی که دوست عزیزمون کرد، رفیق عزیزمون پرسید، راستش من سعی میکنم از یه زاویه دیگه ای جواب بدم. اونم اینه که گاهی وقتا من میگم من ضد امپریالیستم، یا بهتر بگم آدم گاهی وقتا توی مواضع یا یه سوالاتی قرار میگیره، بعد به نظر جواب دادن بهش خیلی سخت و پیچیده است. به نظر من برای جواب دادن به اینجور سوالات آدم باید گاهی وقتا برگرده به حالتهای بنیادی و حالتهای ساده تر شده تا بتونه به جواب این سوالم برسه. ببینید وقتی من میگم ضد امپریالیستم یا یه سر پایی‌تر میگم من آدم آزادی خواهی هستم، آدم سوسیالیستی هستم، یا یه سر دیگه میگم من مثلا آدمی هستم سیاسی، خب واسه چی؟ من واسه چی ضد امپریالیستم؟ برای چی آزادی خواهم؟ اصلا برای چی تو زندگیم پا گذاشتم به سیاست؟ برای اینکه پا گذاشتم چون از خانواده‌ای که بزرگ شدم، از جامعه‌ای که بزرگ شدم، یه سری فقر و بدبختی و فشاری دیدم و فکر کردم اگر بیام توی سیاست میتونم به مردمم کمک کنم. بعد به این نتیجه رسیدم که بین دیدگاه‌های مختلف سیاسی گفتم این دیدگاه بهتره، این دیدگاه انتخاب کردم و بعد گفتم که خب حمله هم به مردم من خوب نیست و من ضد امپریالیستم. ولی اگه قرار باشه یه موضعی از توش در بیاد، با همه تئوری من دکترا پی اچ دی علوم سیاسی داشته باشم و بعد یه تئوری از توش در بیارم که بعد مردم رو گرفت و اعدام کرد، به نظرم همون تئوری غلطه. مهم نیستش که من پی اچ دی سیاست دارم یا با چه فاکت هایی از کتاب های مارکس و بزرگترین تئوریسین های علوم سیاسی بتونم اثبات کنم که اعدام کردن مردم درسته. اعدام کردن مردم غلطه، حالا با هر فاکتی باشه. به خاطر همین توی این بحثا که به نظر من گاهی وقتا آدم توی پیچیدگی خاصی گیر میکنه، من ضد امپریالیسمم ولی متوجه نمیشم عمل ضد امپریالیستی یعنی چی و باید از اون عمل دفاع کرد. من فکر میکنم که طبقه کارگر انگلیس، نیروهای چپ انگلیس احتیاجی به اون ندارن. چرا رو قدرت‌های دیگه‌ای سرمایه گذاری نمی‌کنن؟ چرا باید بگن که ما باید از یک به هر حال از اون اکتی که اون نیرو انجام میده دفاع کنه؟ کارگر این وقتی 2 میلیون نفر میان تو خیابون‌ها و تظاهرات میکنن علیه جنگ، این 2 میلیون نفر اگر چند ساعت حمل و نقل رو بخوابونن میتونن به صورت واقعی جلوی جنگ رو بگیرن و احتیاجی نیست که نیروهای چپ و چیز وارد این بحث بشن که آیا باید از این حکومت دفاع کرد یا نه. به نظر من بحث‌های خیلی مفیدتری میشه کرد. کنم با زیاد شد.
I hope I do justice to what he was trying to say. This is, I think, in reply to the comment by Comrade Stuart over there, over this question of imperialist acts as opposed to anti-imperialist acts as opposed to anti-imperialist regime. He says sometimes, these questions, like what is anti-imperialism, can really appear very complex. It's same when you say I fight for democracy or I fight for socialism, or even more general, I'm active in politics. All these questions, when you are faced with, I think, in my own experience, translating, in my own experience, I try to go back to the basics. Why am I defending democracy? Why am I, defending socialism? because I defend people's interests, I defend, certain demands against certain others, and I discover in order to do that, you have to fight for democracy. In order to do that, you have to oppose imperialism. So let's go to basics, Why do we have to make things so complicated when, we face question of imperialism? If somebody even, I'm not a, political expert, but if somebody with, PhD in politics comes and tries to justify for me that anti-imperialism means justifying executions and murders, I would oppose it. I don't have to have a PhD, in politics to discover that. When in, Britain, 2 million people come out on the street opposing the war, if they organize a transport strike, they probably would stop the war. So the left, instead of sticking to these issues of what is, an anti-imperialist act or not, should do the real acts. I hope it was a lot more, but I have a comment to make on what Comrade said.
من فکر میکنم که در عین اینکه جنبش ضد جنگ و ضد امپریالیستی در انگلیس و در همه کشورهای اروپایی و متروپول داره اهمیت خیلی زیادی برای مردم آزادی خواه سراسر دنیا، ولی باید آغوشش نسبت به جنبش‌های آزادیخواهانه و مبارز تو اون کشورها باز باشه و خودش آزادی بیان و رعایت بکنه که افرادی که از اون کشورها فرار کردن دچار مشکل هستن بتونن حرفشون رو بزنن. و در رابطه با متوقف کردن جنگ به نظر من به جای این مباحث انتزاعی، این به نظر من یک دوگانگی واقعی نیست. میشه به اهرم‌های واقعی تری فکر کرد که من فکر میکنم چپ اینجا قدرتش رو داره. این جواب این سوال میخواید اینو بگید و من جوابشونم بگم و تمام کنیم جلسه.
Okay, yeah. What he sort of finished on was the fact that in the anti-war movement, in the sort of current situation of anti-imperialist struggles globally, still what is the most significant issue is the popular movements, is the social movements, is the workers' movement, is the movement for democracy, which is going on in all these countries. And the only way we can, avoid falling into these traps of, sterile discussions is actually to stick to our gun of defending and linking and building solidarity between these movements globally against these reactionary forces.
و در رابطه با جواب این دوستمون من نمیدونم پایان این جنگ چی میشه یا به نفع چه گروهی تمام بشه، ولی اینو میدونم که این یه جنگیه بین دوتا ارتجاع و مردم حالتی که دارن اینه که بین دو لبه یک قیچی گیر کرده باشن و برنده بودن هیچ کدوم از این دو لبه به نفع مردم نیست.
At the moment, the way people in Iran feel about the war, the threat of war, is they're caught between the blades of a scissor. By which side they are cut, it doesn't make any difference. They are cut. So we basically oppose both. We don't see why we shouldn't oppose both.
We're very short on time.
Because imperialism is finished. That's what I see, and that's you can see it's clear. And now Iranian regime could be more powerful because they are against imperialism. So
are you saying if imperialism, sorry, I couldn't understand because I have to understand to be able to translate. Are you saying if imperialism is gone or is it already gone?
If it's gone, I mean...
If it goes, yeah.
Because we are talking about Iranian regime and imperialism. But we never talked about the imperialism, what is the situation now, and how could it be affected?
We might have to carry on this conversation afterwards because we are very short on time.
من متوجه نشدم
من متفق میشم حقیقش نمیدونم بازی که سوالم که ولی بحثش اینه که I don't know. To be honest, I'm trying to translate. I still don't understand, exactly what you. Yeah.
Do you want a quick comment?
Not really. Just, I forget about the comment I was going to make about Kaveh Stewart's, remark, but just to, re-emphasize the fact that in our experience in Britain, in relation to the student movement in Iran, what I've discovered is the more links, direct links, that are established between students over here and students over there. I don't mean attending meetings or, signing petitions or, coming to demonstrations. I mean direct link, via email, via telephone, via internet, with student activists in Iran is one of the greatest help we can actually provide. Because they're, struggling under very difficult circumstances and in a very harsh situation. And such direct contacts not only gives, a lot of encouragement and moral support, it can actually be very helpful in terms of immediate reaction to events. Because every day students are arrested, they face threat of execution, they need this type of help, they need that type of help. If there are these links established, we could really build a powerful campaign of solidarity. And I wish, the presence of comrades here is utilized to that end. When they go around universities and introduce, the student movement in Iran, I hope, one thing that come out of it could be these direct links. Because HOPI may go away tomorrow, may not exist, things may change, but these links should stay and should be always there, and these are the major things that would help any form of solidarity. And I hope, our student friends who are here would bear that in mind and do their best, because the student movement in Iran has a huge significance for the future of the Iranian situation in Iran. The more we can get to know it, the more we become familiar with it, the more links we build with it, can only help, would be fruitful in many different ways. Also in the way of, I hope you don't take it badly, in the sense of, introducing a sense of, reality to the British students of what, life is about, what is actually going on, it could also help in that area, I bet you.
Okay, before we go, sorry for overrunning for that. I'd like to thank both our comments from both our comments from Iran, our student comments from Iran, whose speeches are truly inspirational, and also thanks to Torab for translating so well, I think, for the 2.5 hours we had with this. So a big round of applause to all three of you. In terms of some of the concrete actions we can take up in making those links and taking up activity, we do have a society here at King's College, the people to see, John and Jamie, they organise our work here on King's College campus. We do a lot of different stuff. And also you can get HOPI membership cards there. It's only a £5 for your students, so make the most of it while you are. And basically we'll be building now for our conference in December, which is, comrades mentioned it before, Azar 13 last year, which is December the 6th, I think you said. We're going to be celebrating that as part of our conference, celebrating those struggles as a truly inspirational sign of solidarity from our comrades in Iran. It'll be it's the start of December. We'll keep comrades informed, and it should be a fantastic event. So thank you for coming. Like I said, we will be going for a drink now if comrades want to stay and get to know each other. And once again, thanks for coming.